Recording in progress. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Sandy. What are we talking about today?
We are going to be talking about leading in coaching sessions. And, well, what do we mean by leading? In a nutshell, leading is bringing the client into a space that is chosen by the coach. Not just telling what a client to do, but this is the obvious. So, like if you're talking about diets and you say, "What about paleo?" This sort of dismisses the client experience and their thoughts, and it pushes them to one thing, which is your thing. Or maybe you could say something like, "I think that meditation would be great for you to try." I mean, that's obvious, right? And this might be a whole nother episode on maybe that type of leading or giving information. Maybe we can have another episode on that. But today we're going to be talking about, air quotes, leading without leading. So before we get to what that is, why is leading bad? Like why is it not maybe such a good thing in coaching sessions?
Yeah, why is leading not such a good thing? You've already touched on a few of those things, but they kind of fall into this category which we call coach agenda, where the coach has this kind of idea inside them saying, "Oh, this person has a problem. I have their answer, right? Or I know what they need right now." And there's a problem with that because, well, we may not know exactly what they need or want. And we're coaches, we're not clinicians, where we're prescriptive, where we say, you know what, you have this symptom and you need this pill to solve it. So it's kind of not what we do. And the ramifications of that is we might lose clients because if we offer them something that was either the wrong suggestion or we interpret the wrong thing was going on inside them, they may not come back because our observations are more incorrect than they're right, right? So, or oftentimes we don't check. We just say, "Oh, you need this," and we don't ask them, "Hey, did we get it right? What do you think?" or something like that. So they may react negatively to being us being so directive, if that observation may not be offered in a great way. And also, if it really didn't come from within them, they didn't generate it or they didn't resonate with it, it may not be what the client wants or needs right now.
Yeah, well said. And we're going to get to a little bit more of that checking in bit and talking about that in this leading without leading. And something you said reminded me of scope of practice. Like leading might be bad because it can really take us out of our scope of practice as coaches. And maybe coaches are also therapists. Maybe they're also teachers, mentors. Maybe health coaches are also nutritionists, dietitians. That's all well and good. Or maybe they just come to this new career starting over as a coach. But point being, there might be legal ramifications if we are telling people what to do or leading them in that fashion. And again, this might be a better conversation for an episode on giving information. And this, for me, it goes back to just being really clear on what coaching is and what coaching isn't, what our role is, what it isn't. Okay, rant over. That just all popped up when you were talking.
No, thanks for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so now that we know what leading is, what is this concept of leading without leading that you put forth earlier?
Yeah, I would say that leading without leading, and again, I'm not talking about offering information here. It's basically sharing what you think or feel or see, and then checking with the client, asking what they think or feel or see. And as I'm saying this, I'm reminded of our episode on language, where we talked about using thinking or feeling language and inviting them into that space. Would that be considered leading without leading? I know I'm going off a tangent here, but what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's like, okay, we admit it. We were trying to be snappy with the title. You know, we said leading without leading might get you in here wondering what the heck we're talking about. I think we're talking more about offering potentially an intuitive observation of what's going on in the client or whatever they had said right before, right? They're offering up what's going on inside them. And we kind of give them our take on it. It's like we see this happening, that happening. So that's kind of what we really mean by leading without leading.
I like that, intuitive observations. Yeah. So, yeah, what is your take on this? And you also called it, like in our little doc here, you called it making intuitive suggestions. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So the client speaks in a coaching session. We listen deeply, actively, all the good stuff that we know how to do. And then you might ask them, what do you think? What's coming up for them? And oftentimes they may go, I don't know, right? Or they don't have an answer. They just kind of sit there. So then you reflect and you offer something that's generated within you, say an observation from your intuition. Okay, so this is more than just a reflection, just repeating back what they said, validating whatever they said and showing them that they were heard. But it's really wrapped in with something led by your intuition. It really talks about the thing beneath the thing. So oftentimes this observation may be most effectively offered after the client has nothing to say or offer, or potentially has maybe low or no developed awareness of what's going on inside them.
Yeah, it might be a really good way to elicit or evoke, as the competency says, ICF competency, evoke awareness to make those intuitive suggestions.
Yeah, so having described kind of under what situation this might happen, I don't know, why would we want to do this? Why would we want to lead without leading or make these intuitive suggestions?
So the first thing that comes up for me is that it's kind of our job as a coach to do this. It's in our job description. So if we're just reflecting what they said, asking questions, I mean, that's pretty basic. And you can coach that way. You can totally coach that way. But I don't think it would be a very deep or transformational session. Do you?
No, I don't think so, because we're just kind of parroting back whatever they're saying. And yeah, they get value in terms of, oh, coach heard me, they get me, they understand me. But we're also missing an opportunity to potentially go deeper, right? And to give them something that they may not have seen themselves.
Right. And we're thinking partners. Coaches often use that description of what they do. We help you think, and we think differently. Not everyone thinks the same way. That's probably why you were hired as a coach, to help them think and to offer another perspective.
Yeah, I love that
yeah.
comment, thinking partner, thought partner. We might also call ourselves feeling partners as well. Potentially, they may not even know what they're feeling. And if we bring that to light, we like to sometimes say shine a light on what's going on inside them, then they may have better awareness or more awareness of what's going on inside them.
I like that. Got to be careful with that language, though. Feeling partners might might elicit something else. Not safe for work, children.
Yeah, make sure you're 21 before you listen to this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Put a little rating on this.
That's right.
So, yeah, well, why else would we want to make these intuitive suggestions?
Yeah, some other possible reasons are maybe our sessions are really short. You know, you and I both work for these big coaching companies, and our sessions are set for 30 minutes. So if the session's short and we're with a client who maybe has lowered awareness of what's going on, it may really help move the session along versus, yeah, we could help them along and get it out of them with more questioning, and that's great. But sometimes we just want to get these folks moving into a good place in the allotted time that we have, which is pretty short, which is 30 minutes. Generally, right, we're helping the client become more aware of something they could not articulate or could not see themselves, right? So that's really valuable for us as a coach for them to be able to give them that awareness. Now, we could take time to coach them to greater awareness, and I think over the arc of a coaching engagement, that may happen and something we want to work towards. but sometimes we only see them for 30 minutes and then they disappear. So let's give them something really good in that short time. I've also had clients who just get really frustrated with lots of questions from the coach. I don't know if you've seen that, Sandy, or not, but it does take time to get the questioning, and some people get frustrated, but let's get to the point as soon as possible. Sometimes clients might be expecting some kind of insight from us coaches. So, when we offer these observations, I've generally seen people enjoy that experience and appreciate it. But are we actually bordering on therapy and mentoring? And probably might get into this later, where how can we do this without kind of crossing into those scope of practice places where we don't want to get into. But you know what? A lot of people clients show up asking for our expertise and all this kind of thing. They may even think that's part of what they pay for, what they show up for, even if we're not therapists. So, okay, as long as we don't cross that scope of practice line, yeah, let's give them some additional insight by shining a light on what's going on inside them. Yeah, lots of good stuff there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would, as you were talking, I was just thinking, well, I guess it depends on the client, like what you offer, how you offer it. And yeah, the length of the sessions might have a lot to do with it too. I mean, we don't want to ever be pushing a client, but if we can make an intuitive observation suggestion that'll help move that client faster, that's not a bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely so.
So, okay, here's $1 million question, David Shen. How do we lead without leading? How do we do this intuitive suggestion stuff without truly leading the client? Tell me how.
It is so easy. 2 words. Observation, check. That's it.
That's it?
That's all you got to do.
Explain.
More than that. Yeah, exactly.
Explain,
Okay.
please.
So, in a nutshell, you make that observation, that kind of intuition-led observation that collects everything together, and then ideally you check afterwards to make sure you got it right. So, an example would be, I'm sensing, seeing this, whatever it is. What do you think? Right? Observation and then check. So one thing to watch out for is what kind of language do you use in that? So you don't want to say something like, hey man, it looks like you're totally missing the point when you talk to your wife. What do you think? Right? That's a little bit more aggressive and may not get the right result. It does have the same maybe observation quality, but yeah, we'd want to watch how we deliver that observation.
Not very coach-like.
No.
Not very coach-like. Yeah, we've talked about this check, so checking in, that asking, what do you think? We've talked about that before. This is my favorite question. And it's so easy. It doesn't have to be fancy. You just, or for feelers, for people who are more feeling centered, how do you feel about that? What are your feelings? You can ask, how does that resonate with you? How does that land? I'm noticing this. What are you noticing? So there's myriad ways you could ask this question. But I think, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, I think that check part, the checking in part, is often missing from conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually heard from other clients with other coaches that they get tired of hearing, what do you think? What do you think?
Yeah.
It's like our favorite response, our coach response. So it's good to offer up all those different, potentially different options.
Yeah, mix it up. But if you don't, if you just offer something, I mean, number one, that is kind of leading. We're missing the other part without leading.
That's right.
And it doesn't elicit more thinking, processing, verbalizing from the client. Things will just fall flat. So it doesn't continue the conversation if you don't ask a question. Absolutely. So yeah, this checking in, does this absolve us from leading? What do you think? Haha. What do you think, Dave?
Dang, you ask that a lot, don't you? No,
I know.
Well, there's some dangers right? If we're making these observations, for example, your intuition was wrong, okay? So if we have to check in to make sure that we get it right, okay? It's possible that your client might accept your observation even if it was not actually on point, okay? Because they don't want to anger you or displease you, right? They want to keep you happy because they have something inside them that says, I got to keep coach happy, which, I don't mind, but, but still. Yeah, so got to check in, really important. It's possible that our own biases are driving the observation and tainting it, potentially. So we have to really watch out for that. And it may flow ultimately the conversation to a conclusion that's something that isn't sustainable or even correct in the end. So that's a problem. So when the client walks away, they say they will do something, and then ultimately it drops off because it was ultimately the wrong thing that we ended up in, in the conversation.
You mentioned pleasing the coach, and I'm thinking of people pleasers. And if you have a client who is not self-assured, self-confident, I mean, maybe that's why they come to coaching. Maybe they are people pleasers. When we as coaches lead, even by sharing intuitively with these types of clients, we may not be empowering them. And this can be tricky. So we really have to know our clients and their tendencies. I know I challenge those clients. I'm like, what do you really think? And my clients know I'm super funny. So so I'll joke with them. I'll be like, I'm calling BS. Like, really? Do you agree with that? No, really? And I'll challenge them in a playful way. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like we have to be careful because sometimes we can be enabling them to stay the same, if that makes sense.
Yep, totally.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there have been times when I go, what do you think? And they go, oh, yeah, that's right. And I go, I don't know, that sounds a little bit weak, wimpy, whatever we want to say at that point. And then usually that draws it out of them. It's like, I'm not buying that, right? It's like, so yeah, the challenge, getting good at challenges is usually a good thing overall here.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about trust later, but like trusting your intuition and trusting that sense of what you're seeing. Like, do you really believe the client? Like, are they just trying to please you? Like, there's a trust that can be cultivated of your own intuition that will only help the client in the long run.
Absolutely. All right. So, hey, I'm curious, what ICF core competencies, PC markers, where does this kind of fall under in our kind of line of business?
Yeah, so there's a few markers in the competencies from the International Coaching Federation that come forward. I'll speak to a few of them here. I mean, you can go through the whole thing and maybe tie back each and every one of them, but I'm going to speak to a few here. So competency 4, which is cultivating trust and safety, and marker 4, so this is 4.4. I think this speaks to the checking in part that you mentioned earlier. So you share an observation and you check in. And marker 4.4 is coach partners with the client by inviting the client to respond in any way to the coach's contributions and accepts the client's response. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, we've kind of touched on this a lot already, meaning we really need to kind of get with the client, partner with them, right, to be able to get them to the right place, right? So yeah, especially through trust and safety, that's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm. So competency 6, listens actively. This, I'm just going to lump in three markers here. And this is coach inquires about or explores the words the client uses, the emotions of the client, and energy shifts, nonverbal cues, or other behaviors. I don't know, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, absolutely. because as the client is responding, or even maybe non-verbally responding, they can't respond. We're reading that energy. We're reading whatever it is. We heard what they said, and we're giving it back to them in potentially a more insightful way that they couldn't get themselves.
Yeah, well said. And then competency 7, which is evokes awareness. I think this is the one that truly embodies what we're talking about here, this leading without leading. And this is marker 5, so 7.5. Coach shares with no attachment observations, intuitions, comments, thoughts, or feelings, and invites the client's exploration through verbal or tonal invitation. Ooh, they say tonal invitation. So maybe you're not even asking a question. Maybe you're not even checking in. Maybe the tone is the check-in. That was what are your thoughts? The tonal version of what are your thoughts?
Yeah, coaching with grunts only is probably a good episode we should do only.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
Yeah,
Grunts.
that's right.
Only got it.
There you go.
Yeah, but I think this one sort of embodies what we're talking about, don't you think?
Absolutely. Maybe even the one that kind of captures all of it together, and how important it is to do that. So what do you hear when you review sessions from new coaches regarding this idea of leading without leading?
Well, there's 3 things that come up for me when it comes to leading without leading, and those intuitive suggestions, and they're all missed opportunities. So the first is that the coach just doesn't see or doesn't hear something, shift in energy, body language, verbal cues, language, metaphors, emotions. They just don't see it or hear it. The second is that maybe the coach does see something, but they don't say anything. So they're ignoring their intuition. And I see this in videos I review, session reviews. The client says something, I'm like, ooh. And I look at the coach, and the coach is like, they don't say anything, but you could tell they heard it. I'm like, oh, you missed it. But you could tell they saw it. And the last thing I see is that a coach will notice something. It'll be really good noticing. They'll offer it back to the client, but then they won't check in. And now, after reading that marker 7.5 with just the tonal check-in, maybe they don't need to verbally check in. But yeah, it's something I notice that's missing, that check-in. So they'll make the observation, but they won't check in. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, when you speak about that, it kind of brings me actually back to when I was starting as a coach, like all those moments I've missed, and I don't note it until either I'm aware of it and I go, man, I kick myself after the session, or I hear it in the recording, or something happens. But yeah, and I think in a moment we'll probably get into exactly what's going on in the coach that may be barriers for them to actually do this.
And this is why it's so good to listen back to your recordings, to have an assessor assess your recordings, because you don't know what you don't know. And maybe you do hear it or see it after the fact, like it sounds like you did. But yeah, and lots of practice, for sure.
Yeah, don't we all wish that we could have Sandy kind of hanging off in our back view? Giving
No
us
one
that
wants
little voice.
that.
You missed that. Say something.
No one wants that. Oh, Lordy.
One can only wish.
Did I mention I'm divorced? No. Anyway, so focus.
Yes,
So
back to the podcast.
back to the podcast, our regularly scheduled podcast. So Dave, how can coaches practice? Speaking of practicing, looking for those barriers, challenges, all that. How can new coaches practice this leading without leading?
Yeah, so probably one of the biggest ones is to develop your intuition, right? So really get used to listening, what you're feeling inside, what's coming up inside you as the other person's speaking, or even just sitting there in front of you. Release the ego, right? Just always check, this is kind of the coach agenda part of you probably coming up and welling up inside you saying, I know the answer. And you're like, well, no, stop. be okay with the fact that you could be wrong, right? That whatever you offer forth, it might be right, but it also could be wrong. And that's okay. Just keep going, keep moving. Who cares, right? But, bottom line, you just want to summarize what the client said with your intuitive interpretation on top. So it's kind of like the next level of development in becoming really good at reflections. Okay. And overall, relax. Just stay calm. Do not get antsy for any reason. That will help a lot.
And if you are getting antsy, be curious about that. What's causing that antsiness? Maybe you need a coach. Coaches need a coach. Episode 2, 3,
yeah,
4. Check it out.
Watch our podcast again. Yeah, or listen to them again.
Yeah, to add to what you said and to what I mentioned earlier about missed opportunities and practice those active listening skills, even out of sessions, practice with your friends and family, notice their shifts, energy shifts, notice their language, and also trust. Like trust your intuition. You mentioned that too. Intuition, we need to have an episode on intuition. But if you see something, say something, and trust that, either the client accepts it or not. And release outcomes. And something else coming to mind as I mentioned trust, and I'm thinking about trust and safety again. And that is to create a safe space for your client to respond in any way to your offers. The more safe they feel, the more likely they'll be able to respond honestly and authentically. And this will help you feel more comfortable sharing as well. So it goes both ways. What else? Yeah, what you said, always check, always ask for those thoughts and feelings. What do you think? How do you feel when I say that? Always invite the client to respond.
All good stuff.
So what could get in the way? So let's talk about some challenges, barriers. What could get in the way of new coaches making intuitive suggestions and leading without leading?
Well, let's see. Perhaps the coach would offer something and then they get really attached to it, as if I made a statement, I can't look like I was wrong or made a mistake, so they just don't let it go. Okay, so really being unattached, really detached to what you offer up is really key here. Just offer it, and if it's wrong, let it go, right? Just keep going, okay? And potentially you should pay attention to what comes next then, because often the client will go, oh, that's wrong, but, right, they'll say, oh, but it's more like this. It's like, hey, but think of this as good job. Even though you offered the wrong intuitive suggestion, you got the right thing out of the client, which you either missed or the client didn't offer before. Potentially that performance anxiety might be there. It's like, I need to get it right. I need to hit it on the mark every time. It's like, no. Even the best coaches out there might be getting it wrong for whatever reason, and it's okay. Just let all that go. Working on your own triggers, right? That can help. That can hinder you getting the right intuitive suggestion. It kind of moves towards you thinking you know what the client wants because maybe you went through it, before. Oh, if I went through that same trauma, then they must need my path in order to get better. Like, well, probably, maybe not. Maybe not. Who knows? You mentioned this before, right? Sometimes you're fearful of offering an observation, right? For whatever reason, right? You might fear upsetting them, angering them, saying the wrong thing. All that kind of stuff might be coming up. So don't be fearful of making that observation. Jump in and make it. You can even pause the client and say, oh, wait, let's rewind to what you said a second ago, right? Why did you say, what makes you say that, but whatever. Okay, so remember your challenge skills here to either pause the client if they're talking too much, to get to it, to really dig into an important point so they don't kind of roll past it. Or, don't buy it if they say, oh yeah, that sounds right. And it isn't. So get in there and verify more and more and more and make sure you get to the root cause of whatever's going on.
You make a good point about interrupting a client. Maybe we can have an episode on that. Especially for those clients who are verbal processors, they talk things out. There might be a lot of story. To interrupt them with your intuitive suggestion, with that observation, might really help them stay on track and allow them to get more out of the session.
Yeah, because often in that long dialogue that's going on,
Yeah.
there are some really important points, and
Yep.
you need to hop on those before they kind of roll by and keep going. So don't let them steamroller you with
Right.
their endless dialogue. Stop them when you hear something that's super important. Yeah.
Right. And you make an excellent point about not attaching to outcomes and non-attachment. And this will be so much easier for some coaches than it is for others. And I jotted down coach people pleasers. So maybe we have a coach who's a people pleaser and they're getting really attached and, they're like, oh, but they didn't like that suggestion. One of my strengths is I'm really good at non-attaching. It takes a lot to piss me off, hurt me, upset me, disagree. I care, but I don't care. And that's a strength. And I can overuse that to a fault, but we're not going to go there today. This isn't about me. But just not attaching to whatever they say, to whatever you offer. Okay, just move along. So if you find yourself having trouble letting go, get some coaching. Get some coaching on it. And one other thing I'll add, and I've said it before, but this might be a barrier if coaches are not used to their intuition or not used to trusting their intuition, maybe being fearful of saying something that might not land well. So yeah, letting go of what you're offering and letting go of what's received. Maybe your intuition was way off. That's okay. Your intuition will get better with practice and you'll be able to trust it more and more. So what else? Is that it for today? Is that it for today? This seems short. But any final thoughts? Did we miss anything?
I think what's coming to mind is the concept of courage, right, in coaching, right? You really have to be brave, right, to offer up that something that you sense inside us for the benefit of the client, right? That's what we're here for. It's for them, not for us, right? So if we see something or feel something, we got to offer it, right? Don't let the opportunity go. And sometimes it takes a lot of courage to do that, to be able to kind of offer that. And yeah, I think the detachment is super important. We probably should think about how we can do an episode on that. But yeah, generally, it takes, and I think you can probably remember back too, when you were starting out, it's like it takes a lot of self-work to be able to detach. And like, as you said, right, not care, no matter what the client's saying or doing or whatever they're offering forth. It's just sit here and go like, be compassionate and loving and just accept what it is and got that intuition going and offer it back to them no matter what's going on there. So yeah, do what you can to develop that. And I'm a big one on intuition as well. So
Yeah. And I want to rewind what I said about non-attaching because I'm good at that now. And once I figured it out, it does come easily for me. But yeah, when I first started out, I was like, oh no, I'm doing it wrong. Oh no, they didn't like what I said. What? Oh, what's another question? And then I'd get kind of tied up in my thoughts. But once I relaxed into that idea of just letting it go, things got a lot better. I would just add to that, trust your intuition, which we said a million times. And what you just said, if you see something, say something. It's our job as coaches to point out what we see in here and always hand it back to the client.
Yep, agree with all that. So anything else before we close today then?
I don't think so. I mean, there's always more, but I think this is a good place to close. What do you think? What do you think? What are your
Question
thoughts?
again.
How do you feel? Does that resonate with you? Stacking
Closing
my
resonates
questions.
with me right now.
Closing resonates with me too. All right, cool.
All right, we'll leave some resources in the show notes as always. And where can people find you, Sandy?
You can find me at swansoncoaching.com. Where can people find you, Dave?
CoachDshen.com.
Excellent. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. See you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.